Introducing Scott Ritter's YouTube channel, a platform dedicated to discussing the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Scott Ritter, an expert in international relations, provides in-depth analysis and commentary on the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. With his extensive knowledge and first-hand experience, Scott Ritter offers unique insights into the historical background, geopolitical complexities, and humanitarian aspects of the conflict. Join his channel to gain a comprehensive understanding of the crisis, including its impact on regional stability and global politics. Through well-researched and balanced content, Scott Ritter's YouTube channel serves as a valuable resource for anyone interested in delving deeper into the Russian-Ukrainian war.
All right, let's go to Elena in Virginia. What are potential scenarios of events in case Zelensky blows up the Zaporizhia nuclear station? And before you answer that, Scott, maybe play one, if not two, voicemail messages. Just I want folks to at the risk of seeming a little redundant, I just want folks to understand that this is really on the minds of quite a few people. They are suspecting some kind of a false flag.
Hey, Scott, how's things? Scott, just wondering, what do you think of the situation of the catastrophic failure of the Ukrainian counteroffensive and the possibility that NATO will organize a false flag attack, maybe in Zaporizhia at the nuclear power station or other locations, basically, that we're moving into a new stage of the battle and that it's going to get a bit more nasty?
All right, and here's one more.
Hi guys, hello Scott. Ukraine once again accused Russia of terrorism, referring to its intelligence data and announcing that Russians are going to sabotage the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. It sounds like delirium, but how do you think, Scott? Does the desperation of Zelensky and his puppeteers has reached such an extent to organize such sabotage under false flag? Is it possible? How do you think? Thank you for an answer, and hugs from Moscow.
Hugs to you. I hope you're not going to accuse her of being sexist. I only have 10 more examples of people asking that question. Hang on there, Scott. I'm going to go in alphabetical. No, just kidding. That's it. Hugs from Jeff. What do you have to say?
I'd say that you are sexist neutral there, meaning that you're not sexist. So I retract my previous accusation. I apologize for it.
Too late. It's beyond.
Too late. It's part of the record. Look, here's the thing. We know that the Ukrainians are capable of carrying out horrific acts of eco-terrorism. How do we know this? Because they blew up the dam and they unleashed a torrent of water, which has created horrific damage downstream, ecological damage, the pollution, which is going to be long-term, cost billions of dollars to clean up. This was done by Ukraine. It was planned by Ukraine. We know it because they bragged about planning about it last December. So we know they can do it. Why do they do it? They're doing it because they are losing the war. They're doing it because they know that they can't change that outcome unless they change on a big scale the overall calculus, which means that instead of the West providing Ukraine with technology and money, that the West actually physically intervenes. The Zaporizhia nuclear power plant has always been at the center of scheming on the part of the Zelensky government to get the West to intervene. They fantasize about the time when an international peacekeeping force will come in and take control of the nuclear power plant, thereby liberating Ukrainian soil, because the international community recognizes Zaporizhia not as part of Russia, but as part of Ukraine. So now you have international peacekeepers on Ukrainian soil, and the nuclear power plant now reverts to Ukrainian control. This is their fantasy. This is their dream. And the way they can justify that is by getting everybody concerned about a imminent catastrophe, nuclear catastrophe. Now, you can't generate that catastrophe by saying, oh yeah, we're going to cause it by blowing it up. What you do is you say the Russians are going to do it because the Russians are desperate. The Russians are seeking to punish Ukraine, just like the Russians sought to punish Ukraine by blowing up the dam, by blowing up the Togliatti ammonia pipeline, which was blown up by the Ukrainians, by the way. So the Ukrainians are putting out accusations saying Russia's getting ready to do this. You now have the Ukrainians talking about the imminence of a nuclear catastrophe. The Russians are apparently planting explosives in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. They're going to blow it up and they're going to spread contamination. And now the Ukrainians are telling the citizens to start taking iodine in preparation for radiation exposure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is real. This is real as it gets. The Ukrainians are going to try to attack the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and blame it on the Russians. Now, the good news is this isn't a secret. There's a good cartoon. The Russians have been preparing for this eventuality for some time now, which means that they have war gamed out every potential threat vector, what it could be, what the consequences could be, and how Russia would respond to that. I don't know exactly what the Russians have done. I don't know if they still have all of the nuclear reactors are running, or have they begun to power them down? Have they, what measures they've taken to protect the fuel that's in the cooling ponds? But nothing that the Ukrainians could do will take the Russians by surprise. And I believe the Russians have planned for every eventuality. So the idea that Zaporizhzhia is going to be turned into some sort of modern day Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island or Fukushima, I think is far-fetched, because Fukushima happened because a tsunami came in that nobody predicted. 3 Mile Island happened because of a failure that nobody predicted. Chernobyl happened because of a failure that nobody predicted. Zaporizhzhia, the Russians have had months to war game every potential. There's not going to be anything that happens there. It's going to take the Russians by surprise. So I do believe that the threat from Ukraine is real. I also believe that Russia is capable of responding and mitigating those the damages, because they're not going to be taken by surprise.
Gene Doe from Western Europe. General Petraeus said that he wants to prove to Putin that Russians will not be able to outsuffer Europeans and Americans. How long do you think we're going to play this outsuffering game?
Well, first of all, in order to play a game, all parties have to be in agreement that a game is being played. This is David Petraeus, the man who gave us the surge in Afghanistan, the man who lied to Congress repeatedly about the Afghan war, a man with no integrity whatsoever. He's a man who has sold his soul to mainstream TV. The comment that you're referring to was a comment he made as an analyst on cable television. He's somebody who's taken a vehemently anti-Russian, anti-Putin posture. So that all has to be taken into account with what he's saying. He needs to watch his words very carefully, by the way. The collective West in totality suffered around 1 million dead during World War II. The British, the Americans, the French, all together, about 1 million dead. The Russians suffered 27 million dead. You think you're going to outsuffer the Russians? It's the Soviets, but you think you're going to outsuffer them? In this current fighting, the Ukrainians have suffered, since this counteroffensive started, an estimated 13,000 dead. 13,000 dead. Now, Vladimir Putin has said that the kill ratio is 10 to 1. And that's pretty impressive, except that when you suffer 13,000 dead, that means that the Russians have suffered 1,300 dead in less than 3 weeks. 1,300 dead. If the United States suffered 1,300 dead in less than 3 weeks, there would be congressional inquiries. If we had that many body bags coming home to Dover, the nation would be shouting, "What the hell is going on?" And yet Russia absorbs these casualties and continues on. Petraeus, you can't outsuffer Russia. Let me tell you why. You see, Russia understands that this conflict is a conflict of existential survival. It's of an existential nature that they can't lose this or else Russia is gone. The Russia they love, the Russia that they have worked so hard to rebuild after the decade of the 90s will be gone. So this is a life and death, a literal life and death struggle for Russia. You can't outsuffer that because they're willing to suffer any price to save their nation. Now, what price is the collective West willing to pay to bring this pain to Russia? And the answer is hardly anything. We know this because of the way that the United States and NATO have acted on a principle that George Soros put into play back in 1993, the one that said, in confronting Russia, what needs to happen is a system needs to be created where you have Eastern European manpower married with NATO technology that's used to bring pain to Russia. That was in 1993. Today, it's exactly what's happening. Eastern European manpower, that's Ukraine, is being married with NATO technology to bring pain to Russia. Why? Because we don't want NATO body bags. We don't want American body bags. We can't, the idea that Russia is going to outsuffer us, that's just ridiculous because we're not playing the same game. We're not suffering at all. And I can guarantee you this, the moment we begin to suffer, it's over. It's done. Standard question that I ask, how many mothers in Poughkeepsie are willing to sacrifice their sons for Ukraine? And the answer is none. None. How many American moms right now are saying, sign my son up? How many American wives are saying, honey, why are you still here? Why haven't you gone and signed up to fight in Ukraine? How many parents are calling their sons and saying, hey, boy, why are you still in America? You need to be in Ukraine, laying your life down on the line for them Ukrainians. Ain't happening. In Russia, it is happening. Parents are calling their children and saying, I think it's time we go to the front. The number of volunteers that have stepped forward in the last month is mind-boggling. You have contract soldiers signing up at unbelievable numbers. And in addition to that, you have volunteers signing up, people who don't have to be there. They're not doing it for the money, for a profession. You have people who actually wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, I'm not happy with who I see staring back at me because my country is at war and they need me and I'm here, doing whatever I'm doing. And they go and they volunteer to serve in the front lines in a war that is killing thousands. And yet they keep volunteering. Petraeus, you can't outsuffer the Russians. It's not even in the cards. This is a life and death struggle. The Russians are putting everything on the line. And when that happens, they can't be beat.
All right. Why don't we depart from our usual format? We usually take the live questions at the end of the show, but I know this is something on the minds of a lot of folks. Bella, I think that's the nice woman that you met with Tori in Boston, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
She
Hello,
says,
Bella.
I know it's an ongoing development, but if you had a chance to see it, could you please comment on what's going on in Russia as we speak? She may be talking about the mutiny. That's even more severe than the mutiny perpetrated by Tori on this very podcast.
Tori perpetrated a mutiny?
Well, Anne's not here, so you can interpret the evidence however you want.
We need to arrest her now.
Citizen arrest.
I don't mean to laugh because, look, here's the thing about what's going on. I think what they're referring to are statements made by Yevgeny Prigozhin that are inflammatory in nature, and if taken at face value, indicate that he is declaring a mutiny against Shoigu, the Minister of Defense. It's not against Vladimir Putin, but they're demanding that Shoigu, according to Prigozhin, he and Wagner are demanding that Shoigu step aside, and also Gerasimov, the general, the head of the general staff, step aside. Shoigu and Prigozhin have had a feud that has been going on for some time now. It came to a head while I was in Russia. it got so bad that Vladimir Putin actually had to call both of them into his office and read them the Riot Act. And understanding the level of animosity that existed between Shoigu and Prigozhin, what Putin did is brought in Surovikin, the General Armageddon, who had been the commander of the special military operation after the successful Ukrainian counterattack in September. He stabilized the front line, and then he was put in charge of the air campaign. Highly respected general. Prigozhin gets along with him, and so he said, instead of going through Shoigu, you'll go through Surovikin from now on, but knock this off. But Prigozhin didn't knock it off. He continued to be critical, continued to troll Shoigu. Now, some people might ask the question, but is Prigozhin right? I mean, is this trolling just a troll, or does Prigozhin have a point? And that's fundamentally a question for Russia to answer. But just on first principles, nations operate under rules and regulations, systems of law. And I've talked about this before, how Wagner was created to fill an operational need that could not be constitutionally met by Russia, meaning that when the decision was made to assist the ethnic Russians who were opposing the cultural genocide and literal genocide being waged by this neo-Nazi Banderist government that took over in Kiev after the February 2014 Maidan, you couldn't send the Russian army in legally, because constitutionally the Russian army can't go into a foreign soil without the permission of the Duma, the Federal Assembly, and that hadn't been given. Putin hadn't asked that question. So Wagner was created as a private military contractor. Now, what's important about that is, under Russian law, private military contractors can't operate on Russian soil. It's against the law, but they're not. They're operating on Ukrainian soil. Well, the soil of the Donbass, of Lugansk, of Donetsk. They were created, special contracting vehicle. They recruited people of very particular skill sets, military veterans, and they provided advice and assistance to the militias, professionalizing them in a way. And then when this conflict started, it transitioned into a special military operation. Wagner was given a sector of the front. They were given their own zone of operations, and Wagner brought in their veterans, recruited some new people, and became a core-sized unit. 25, 30,000 strong. I think at some point they might have gotten up to 50,000 strong when they got into their innovative recruiting from prisons to create storm units, specialized storm units. But the bottom line is, Wagner became an important part of this campaign. They were given a very, very difficult front, and they advanced through some of the most difficult fighting that one can imagine. The battles for Soledar. I think before Soledar there was I'll butcher the name, so I'm not going to say it, but Severnyansk, I think it was. But they had victory after victory. Then they got into the Battle of Bakhmut or Artemyevsk, and this became the famous or infamous, depending on which side of the border you're on, meat grinder operation. Bloody fighting, horrific fighting, and it took on strategic consequences as Ukraine poured more and more resources into it. At the end of the day, Wagner gutted the Ukrainian military. 75,000 dead. 75,000 dead Ukrainians because of the way Wagner waged his conflict. And Wagner emerged with a well-deserved reputation as one hell of a fighting force. No matter what you think of Yevgeny Prigozhin, no matter what you think of Wagner, are they mercenaries, don't denigrate their combat efficiency. These guys went into an urban combat environment where normally you need a 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1 advantage if you're going into a dug-in enemy. That means for every Ukrainian dug in, you should have 5 guys going at them. And Wagner flipped the script and was attacking at a 1-to-3 disadvantage. That means for every 3 Ukrainians dug in, there's only 1 Wagner soldier. But they were able to achieve their results because of superior command and control, superior tactics, and just having the guts to wage war violently and aggressively with just extreme violence. And what Wagner would do is basically overwhelm you with violent initiative. There was never a pause. These guys just hit you, saturated you with artillery fire, machine gun fire, infantry closing in, so that 1 Wagner soldier could defeat 3 Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians spent the whole time with their heads down. Now, not all the time, because they'd fire back. I think Wagner suffered around 30,000 dead. Some of the assault units of Wagner suffered upwards of 60% casualties. This was heavy, heavy fighting. These guys are heroes from a Russian perspective. And I think most of Russia views them as heroes, treats them as heroes. But here's the problem. When the battle for Bakhmut, when the meat grinders started, it was March of 2022. The territory they were fighting on wasn't Russia. Technically, it was independent. Donetsk and Lugansk had voted for independence, passed a referendum, and they were independent. They hadn't yet been absorbed by Russia. So Wagner is legally operating, and now they're hooking and jabbing in what has become the most important battle in the war at that time. So Wagner's engaged in this battle. They're fighting really, really hard, and all of a sudden, in September, October, they hold a referendum, and that territory becomes Russia. And now we got a problem, because private military contractors can't operate on Russian soil. But Wagner's in the middle of a life and death struggle. So you're not going to get involved in, a contractual renegotiation in the middle of this. First of all, Wagner fights the way they do because of streamlined command and control. They don't have traditional military bureaucracies because they don't need them. They're already specialists. These are experts in their art. So they have a commander's council that makes decisions, passes it down to the field commanders with very little formality. And the field commanders come up with a plan, brief it, then they execute it. That doesn't require a lot of coordination, a lot of preparation. They just do it. So we've talked in the past about the OODA loop, Colonel Boyd's decision-making cycle: observe, orient, decide, act. The idea is that if you can execute the OODA loop quicker than your opponent, then you are inside his decision-making cycle, so that they are reacting to you. And in fighter parlance, that means you're going to shoot them down every time. On the ground, it means you're going to defeat them in combat every time. And Wagner, because of their streamlined approach, has a very tight decision-making cycle, and they ran circles around the Ukrainians. That's why they beat them so badly. Wagner doesn't want to give this up. And they feel that they are best when they operate independent of the Ministry of Defense, independent of the regular army. But now by law, they can't do that anymore. And they ran into some problems. I mean, you saw it immediately.